Standing at my living room window 3 months later, I watched workers remove the "For Sale, Foreclosure" sign from Karen Miller's front yard. Blue powder stains still clung to her fence like battle scars from that unforgettable night. The former HOA president's reign of terror had ended not with legal documents or board votes, but with her stumbling out of my backyard at 2:47 a.m. looking like a demented rainbow peacock. 18 months in federal prison, $47,000 in restitution, and a lifetime ban from HOA governance were just the beginning of her downfall. What really destroyed Karen wasn't the criminal charges. It was the footage of her panic-filled phone call while scrubbing purple powder from her hair, accidentally confessing to a $2.8 million conspiracy that started with her uncle's buried treasure. Karen Miller had ruled Willowbrook Heights like a petty dictator for 3 years, her signature blonde curls and red HOA polo shirt striking fear into homeowners across our community. At 38, she wielded HOA regulations like weapons, finding violations where none existed and imposing fines that seemed designed more to harass than maintain standards. Her victims called her HOA Karen behind closed doors, but nobody dared challenge her directly until she made the mistake of targeting me. What Karen didn't know was that I'd spent 8 years in fraud investigation for a major insurance company, specializing in property scams and buried asset cases. At 32, I looked like just another vulnerable homeowner she could bully into submission. Sarah Martinez, our former HOA treasurer, had resigned 6 months earlier, citing ethical concerns about Karen's leadership. Thomas Rodriguez, Karen's main accomplice, ran the accounting firm that handled HOA finances and secretly operated Willowbrook Investment Partners. These players would soon discover that some games have consequences no one sees coming. The Saturday morning that changed everything started at 6:30 a.m. with Karen standing in my backyard, measuring something with professional-grade equipment. I stumbled outside in pajamas and slippers, coffee-deprived and confused. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller. Is there something I can help you with?" My voice carried the forced politeness of someone trying to avoid confrontation before breakfast. Karen looked up from her measuring tape with eyes that held genuine urgency, not her usual smug satisfaction. "I'm checking property boundaries," she announced, holding up documentation thick enough to choke a horse. "According to the 1987 cadastral survey, your fence line may have encroached on community property." She'd come prepared for this conversation, pulling out HOA Regulation 4.2.7 like a magician producing a rabbit. "I have a certified survey from 2020 showing everything's accurate," I replied, trying to keep irritation out of my voice. But Karen was ready for that objection too. The regulation required a complete property resurvey costing $3,200, submitted within 30 days, or face daily fines of $150. After 60 days, the HOA could reclaim disputed land. It was legal extortion wrapped in bureaucratic language. What struck me as suspicious wasn't just the professional equipment or thick documentation. Karen kept glancing toward my old storage shed, her phone buzzing constantly with calls she refused to answer. When I mentioned possibly installing a security system, her reaction was way too intense. "That's unnecessary," she stammered. "This community is very safe. Cameras just create paranoia." My neighbor Peterson wandered over during the confrontation, drawn by raised voices. "I've lived here 15 years, he told Karen. "Nobody's ever been required to do this." But Karen had an answer for everything, citing precedents and regulations that seemed to materialize from thin air. Her confidence suggested she'd perfected this routine through practice. Before leaving, Karen made a comment that would haunt me for months. 3 families in this neighborhood have moved away in the past 6 months. They all had complications with backyard compliance, but they resolved their issues by selling and starting fresh somewhere else. She walked over to my shed and knocked on the door like testing its structural integrity. Old building like this? Do you store anything valuable inside? For insurance purposes, of course. My professional background in fraud investigation kicked in immediately after Karen left. 8 years of tracking property scams and asset hiding schemes had taught me to recognize patterns, and Karen's behavior didn't match typical HOA power trips. She was too focused, too systematic, and obsessed specifically with properties that had large backyards and detached storage structures. I started with basic property research, cross-referencing public records with Karen's harassment targets. The results were illuminating. 8 of 12 houses she'd cited for violations were built or renovated by Morrison Construction in the late 1980s. All had extensive backyard work done during that period, with city permits showing utility installations, but no corresponding utility company records. The breakthrough came when I discovered Karen Miller's maiden name was Morrison. Jack Morrison, the contractor who built my house, was her uncle. He'd died in 2019 shortly after a tax evasion investigation, with rumors of $400,000 in missing funds from his final construction projects. Suddenly, Karen's interest in backyards made perfect sense. Jack Morrison had likely buried laundered money across properties he'd worked on, and Karen was systematically acquiring access to recover it. The HOA harassment wasn't random. It was targeted reconnaissance disguised as community management. She needed to force property access without raising suspicion, using her position to legitimize what was essentially treasure hunting. My neighbor Sarah Martinez confirmed my suspicions when I approached her carefully. Karen's been using HOA funds for weird expenses, she whispered during a chance encounter at the grocery store. Ground-penetrating radar surveys disguised as foundation inspections. I resigned because I couldn't be part of whatever she was planning. The scope was bigger than I'd imagined. Based on construction records and soil analysis patterns, I estimated buried assets across targeted properties could total $2 to $4 million in cash and precious metals. Karen wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was running a sophisticated asset recovery operation using her official position as cover. Rather than confronting Karen directly or calling police with insufficient evidence, I decided to create irrefutable documentation through controlled circumstances. My professional experience had taught me that treasure hunters become desperate and careless when they think they're close to their goal. Karen would eventually attempt night reconnaissance, and I planned to be ready. The color powder mine concept was perfect psychological warfare, completely harmless but shocking and humiliating, creating undeniable evidence of trespassing while forcing Karen into a panic state where she'd make critical mistakes. I designed 15 pressure-activated devices using modified party popper mechanisms, each containing 200 grams of washable, non-toxic food-grade colored powder. Technical specifications were surprisingly simple but effective. Spring-loaded platforms hidden under thin mulch layers connected to compressed air canisters that released powder when triggered by 80 pounds of pressure. Single-use devices with immediate activation, weather-resistant containers buried 2 inches deep, and colors chosen for maximum visual impact: neon pink, electric blue, bright yellow, lime green, and orange. Strategic placement followed military principles I'd learned from security consulting work. Zone 1 covered the perimeter around my shed and suspected burial areas with 8 mines, forcing specific approach paths. Zone 2 used 4 mines along natural walking routes to channel Karen into predetermined movement patterns. Zone 3 positioned 3 mines at likely exit points, ensuring she couldn't retreat without powder coating. The surveillance integration was comprehensive and legal. 12 night vision cameras with motion activation provided multiple angles covering all mine locations. High-definition capture for court evidence, infrared illumination for clear night footage, and automatic cloud backup for security. Sensitive microphones disguised as garden features would capture conversations with single-party consent recording, synchronized to video timestamps. Creating irresistible bait required theatrical performance worthy of an Oscar. I staged fake phone conversations about valuable discoveries in the backyard when Karen walked by. Metal detectors and digging tools were left visible. Insurance adjuster appointments were mentioned loudly, and fake historical survey documents were displayed. The key was creating urgency that would push Karen past her breaking point. Karen's response to my bait followed the predicted pattern perfectly, escalating week by week as desperation overcame caution. Week 1 brought a flood of violation notices, mailbox height infractions, lawn maintenance citations, and noise complaints from anonymous sources. She was trying to create overwhelming pressure to force compliance with her original demands. Week 2 saw increasingly desperate attempts to gain inspection access to my backyard. Karen showed up with a clipboard and measuring tape, claiming she needed to verify compliance with her previous citations. "I just need 15 minutes to document the corrections," she insisted, but her eyes kept drifting toward the shed. When I politely declined without a court order, her professional mask slipped for just a moment. "Mr. Johnson," she said, dropping the fake friendliness, "you're making this much more difficult than it needs to be. Other residents have been very cooperative with compliance inspection. The implied threat was clear: cooperate or face escalating harassment like the 3 families who'd already been forced to sell." Week 3 brought offers to help with excavation work, supposedly to resolve the boundary disputes more efficiently. "I have connections with surveying companies," Karen suggested during an uncomfortable conversation at my mailbox. "We could get this resolved quickly if you're willing to work with me." And her desperation was becoming palpable, professionalism cracking under pressure. By week 4, Karen had reached her breaking point. The final bait was an afternoon staged conversation designed for her eavesdropping ears. I positioned myself by the mailbox, knowing she monitored the neighborhood from her front window. "Insurance guy coming Monday," I said loudly into my phone. "Need the weekend to finish digging safely. Estimate $50,000 value for items found so far." That night, motion sensors detected Karen's car parked 2 blocks away at 2:15 a.m. Security cameras caught her approaching on foot, dressed in black clothing and carrying a flashlight and small shovel. She'd taken the bait completely, and my color powder mines were waiting patiently for their moment of glory. Karen's infiltration of my property unfolded exactly as predicted, captured in high-definition detail by my surveillance network. At 2:31 a.m., she struggled over my 6-foot fence, landing awkwardly but immediately heading toward the shed. Her direct path confirmed knowledge of the exact target location, bypassing normal walkways in favor of the most efficient route to suspected treasure. The first explosion came at 2:33 a.m. with a satisfying boom that echoed through the neighborhood. Pink powder erupted in a massive cloud as Karen stepped directly onto the hidden pressure plate, coating her from waist down in neon color. Her shocked scream pierced the night air as she staggered backward, completely disoriented and trying to understand what had just happened. "What the hell?" she whispered frantically, attempting to wipe powder off her hands, but only spreading it further across her black clothing. The panic in her voice was immediate and genuine as she realized she'd walked into some kind of trap. But the real comedy was just beginning as Karen's retreat triggered the second mine. Blue powder engulfed her upper body in another massive explosion, transforming her into a walking art project. Now covered head to toe in pink and blue, she resembled a demented circus performer, stumbling through my backyard in blind panic. The combination of colors created an almost psychedelic effect under the infrared cameras, like watching a rainbow come to life and have a nervous breakdown. Complete chaos erupted as Karen ran wildly in every direction, triggering yellow, green, and orange mines in rapid succession. Each explosion added new layers of color, while her panicked movements spread the powder deeper into her hair and clothing. By the time the chain reaction ended, she looked like an abstract art project gone horribly wrong. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Karen emerged from the final powder cloud, coughing and spitting colored dust, her authority and dignity buried under layers of washable paint. More importantly, the shock forced her into the panic state I'd planned for, making the critical phone call that would destroy her completely. At 2:39 a.m., covered in a rainbow of powder and completely disoriented, Karen made the phone call that would seal her fate. My hidden microphones captured every word as she frantically dialed someone, her voice shaking with panic and humiliation. "Plan B is blown!" she gasped, still coughing colored powder. "He set up some kind of trap. I'm covered in... It's everywhere." The person on the other end must have asked for details because Karen continued with increasing desperation. "Yes, I'm at the property. No, I couldn't get to the burial site. There are some kind of mines or something. Powder bombs. He knows about the backyard." The admission was everything I needed for a criminal trespassing case, but Karen wasn't finished destroying herself. "We need emergency extraction of the Morrison cash," she continued, unaware that every word was being recorded. "He's getting too close. The metal detector activity, the digging equipment. He's going to find Uncle's stash if we don't move fast." She was confessing to the entire conspiracy while trying to wash rainbow powder out of her hair with my garden hose. The most damaging admission came next. "We've found 3 sites already, approximately $400,000 recovered so far. But this location was supposed to be the biggest cache." Karen was admitting to systematic theft from multiple properties, while covered in evidence of her criminal trespassing. The irony was beautiful. My harmless prank had trapped her into confessing felonies. "No, we can't abort now," she insisted to whoever was on the phone. "Too much invested, too many properties acquired. Use the emergency clause if necessary." The emergency clause reference would later prove crucial in exposing how they planned to steal properties outright using manufactured HOA emergencies. As Karen attempted to climb my fence while covered in slippery powder, she fell twice, adding dirt and grass stains to her colorful coating. The final image captured by my cameras was a rainbow-colored intruder limping away in defeat, leaving a trail of colored footprints that would lead investigators directly to her door. 5 days after Karen's colorful midnight adventure, the emergency HOA meeting drew every resident in Willowbrook Heights, plus a local news crew that had caught wind of the story. The community center buzzed with excitement and anticipation as people filled every seat, phones ready to record whatever was about to unfold. Karen entered 20 minutes late, her usual commanding presence severely undermined by hair still faintly tinted blue, despite what must have been expensive professional treatment. Powder stains remained visible under her fingernails, and her red HOA polo seemed to mock her multicolored defeat. She tried to project authority, but everyone was staring at the evidence of her humiliation. "Recent events have been mischaracterized," Karen began, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "I was investigating legitimate security concerns when I encountered some kind of practical joke setup." The room buzzed with murmurs and barely suppressed laughter. She was trying to control the narrative, but I had other plans. "Before we discuss practical jokes," I announced, standing up with my laptop and projector, "let's watch what actually happened. I have complete footage from multiple angles." The room fell silent as I connected my equipment to the community center's projection system. Karen's face went pale as she realized what was coming. The first video segment showed crystal-clear night vision footage of Karen climbing my fence with tools at 2:31 a.m. The audience gasped collectively. Someone whispered loudly, "She looks like a burglar." The professional quality of the footage and the obvious premeditation were undeniable. Karen was caught red-handed breaking into my property. The second segment captured the first powder explosion in glorious high definition. Boom! The pink cloud erupted as Karen's scream echoed through the speakers. Nervous laughter from the audience quickly became shocked silence as they realized the serious implications of what they were watching. This wasn't just a prank. It was evidence of criminal activity. The third segment was pure visual comedy, a rapid succession of explosions, each adding new colors to Karen's transformation until she resembled a walking rainbow disaster. The room watched in stunned silence as their former president stumbled around my backyard like a psychedelic zombie. But the fourth segment delivered the knockout punch. Perfect audio from Karen's panic-induced phone call filled the community center speakers. "Plan B is blown. Emergency extraction. He knows about the backyard. The Morrison cache. We've found 3 sites already." The room erupted in angry voices and demands for explanation as residents realized they'd been living under a criminal conspiracy disguised as community management. Karen sat isolated at the head table, her remaining supporters abandoning ship as the evidence mounted. "These recordings are taken out of context," she protested weakly, but the damage was already done. The clear admission of criminal activity was undeniable, captured while she was literally covered in evidence of trespassing. My systematic destruction began with document revelation number 1. Karen Miller's uncle, Jack Morrison, buried approximately $2.8 million in stolen construction funds across properties he built in this neighborhood between 1985 and 1990. I announced, displaying property maps on the projector. Karen has been systematically acquiring access to these properties to recover hidden assets. The visual evidence was overwhelming. Morrison construction sites overlaid perfectly with Karen's harassment targets, creating an undeniable pattern of systematic treasure hunting. Property records, construction permits, and soil analysis reports filled the screen as I built an ironclad case against the woman who'd terrorized our community. Sarah Martinez stood up for document revelation number 2, her voice shaking with righteous anger. Karen used HOA funds to pay for ground-penetrating radar surveys of targeted properties. She disguised them as foundation inspections and pressured me to approve payments for equipment rentals and consulting fees. The financial trail led directly to Karen's asset recovery operation. Document revelation number 3 exposed the full scope of the Willowbrook Investment Partners scheme. This limited liability company wasn't just buying properties below market value, I explained, displaying corporate filings and property transfers. They were excavating backyards, searching for buried assets, then reselling properties after extracting hidden treasure. It's systematic theft disguised as real estate investment. The physical evidence display covered an entire table. Photographs of excavation equipment found in Karen's car, soil samples from multiple properties showing disturbance patterns, metal detector receipts, ground-penetrating radar rental agreements, and detailed maps marking high-probability burial sites. The professionalism and scope of the operation shocked even me. Peterson, my 70-year-old neighbor, stood up with tears in his eyes. "We found evidence that our backyard had been secretly excavated last spring," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. $23,000 in cash that my father buried during the Great Depression was stolen from under our rose garden. We thought we'd just misremembered where he hid it. Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street added her testimony with barely controlled anger. "Those mysterious utility repairs in our yard last winter, they must have found my grandfather's coin collection. We searched everywhere after buying the house from his estate, never could locate it. Now we know why." The systematic nature of the thefts was becoming clear. The Williams family shared the most disturbing revelation. Our property assessment mentioned unusual soil density readings in our backyard. Mr. Williams explained. The assessor suggested additional foundation work that would require excavation. We declined because of the cost, but now we realize they were literally trying to treasure hunt our property with our permission. 3 more families came forward with similar stories. Mysterious backyard maintenance work, foundation inspections that seemed focused on specific areas, and pressure to allow excavation for various manufactured reasons. Karen had been operating a systematic treasure hunting operation across our entire community for over 2 years. The scope was staggering. 18 months of operation, 12 properties directly targeted, approximately $1.2 million in recovered assets attributed to Morrison family inheritance, and total illegal profits exceeding $2.8 million when combined with forced property sales below market value. When Karen finally attempted a defense, standing up with her hair still showing traces of blue powder, her words only dug her grave deeper. "You don't understand the full situation," she shouted, desperation cracking her voice. "Uncle Jack told me about the money before he died. He said it rightfully belonged to the Morrison family. These properties were built with our sweat and blood," and her critical admission, recorded by multiple phones throughout the room, sealed her fate completely. "Yes, we searched properties. Yes, we found money. But it was Morrison family money hidden from unfair government taxation. We were just retrieving family inheritance that had been stolen by bureaucratic red tape." The room erupted in outrage as residents realized she was admitting to systematic theft while claiming moral justification. "This was supposed to be simple," Karen continued, throwing papers across the table in fury. "Just get access, find Uncle's money, restore family honor. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. Property values improved, community standards were maintained, everyone benefited from proper management." Her twisted logic revealed the depth of her self-deception. I stood up calmly and summarized her admissions for the record. "So you admit to criminal trespassing on multiple properties, theft of buried assets totaling over $1 million, fraud and extortion using HOA authority, conspiracy to manipulate property sales through manufactured violations, and abuse of public trust and community funds. Each charge landed like a physical blow. The evidence package presentation was my final move. Everything has been submitted to the FBI Economic Crimes Unit, IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and State Attorney General's Office, I announced. Federal charges include wire fraud, conspiracy, tax evasion, and racketeering. State charges include theft, trespassing, fraud, and abuse of authority. Karen's complete psychological breakdown was spectacular and pathetic. "You people have no idea what this community was like before we brought proper leadership," she screamed, spittle flying from her mouth. "Property values, security standards, community pride, all because of our hard work and dedication. You're destroying everything we built." When she attempted a dignified exit, she tripped over her chair in her rage, causing residual powder to puff out of her hair like a rainbow cloud. The room watched in stunned silence as their former tormentor stumbled toward the door. Her parting shot was delivered with the desperation of someone whose world was collapsing. "You'll regret this. All of you. This community will fall apart without proper leadership." The door slammed behind her, leaving 10 seconds of complete silence before the room exploded in discussion, relief, and demands for justice. The meeting aftermath was swift and decisive, with unanimous votes dissolving the current HOA board and authorizing class action lawsuits against Karen and her co-conspirators. Police arrived within minutes to collect evidence packages, and FBI raids hit Willowbrook Investment Partners' offices the next morning. Thomas Rodriguez was arrested at his accounting firm in front of horrified colleagues. Karen's rainbow-colored mugshot became a viral symbol of HOA justice served, spawning countless memes and social media posts about corrupt community leadership getting their colorful comeuppance. 3 other communities across the state reported similar patterns and launched their own investigations into suspicious HOA activities and property transactions. But the victory came with unexpected personal costs that I hadn't anticipated. The hypervigilance that had caught Karen became a permanent rewiring of my brain for threat detection. Every footstep outside triggered alarm responses. Driving past paint stores made me think about surveillance, and even children's art projects reminded me of evidence photography. Relationship casualties mounted as neighbors found my new intensity unsettling. Mike from the corner house started crossing streets to avoid conversations, telling others I was always watching now. The Peterson family decided to move anyway, citing too many memories of violation and invasion. 3 neighbors submitted formal complaints about my excessive security measures. 8-year-old Emma from next door asked her mother loudly enough for me to hear, "Why does Mr. James have so many cameras? Is he going to put color bombs in our yard too?" Her innocent question made me realize I might have become the neighborhood's new source of fear instead of its protector. Professional recognition came with personal isolation. Speaking engagements at conferences, FBI consultations on similar cases, and feature articles in security magazines filled my calendar. But most nights involved eating dinner alone and avoiding community events where I felt like either a hero or a threat, depending on perspective. The uncomfortable truth was that I'd used the same obsessive documentation, behavioral analysis, and psychological manipulation that Karen had employed. The methods were different, but the underlying mindset of surveillance and control was uncomfortably similar. Victory had transformed me into something I wasn't sure I wanted to be. An unexpected letter from Thomas Rodriguez's teenage daughter drove the point home painfully. My dad made mistakes, but your color bomb stunt destroyed our family. Mom divorced him after the humiliation videos went viral. Dad's depression got so bad he attempted suicide last month. You got justice, but did you consider who else would pay the price? 3 months after Karen's sentencing to 18 months in federal prison with $2.8 million in restitution, I made the decision to sell my house and leave Willowbrook Heights. Not because of pressure or harassment, but because staying meant becoming the permanent watchdog of a community that needed to heal, not be continuously monitored. While packing surveillance equipment and deleting archived footage, Sarah Martinez helped load boxes and offered a haunting observation. You saved us from Karen's corruption, but who saves communities from their saviors? Her words echoed a disturbing truth about the cycle of protection and control. A final discovery while cleaning the basement changed my perspective on everything. Hidden behind old pipes, I found Uncle Jack Morrison's actual construction notes detailing buried assets, totaling only $347,000, not the millions Karen claimed. Her operation had recovered $1.2 million by stealing from homeowners who'd buried their own valuables, then attributing everything to Morrison family inheritance. Karen hadn't just been corrupt. She'd been systematically stealing from families while claiming moral justification. The scope of deception was even worse than I'd documented, but it also meant more families had been victimized than anyone realized. As new owners moved into my former home, a young family with twin daughters, I watched them plant flowers where motion sensors used to hide. Their laughter filled spaces where recordings once captured conspiracies, but I noticed the father installing a basic security system and checking property boundaries carefully. Had I taught this community to be safer or to be afraid? The powder had washed off Karen's skin, but some stains on character and community trust might be permanent. Justice had been served, but the recipe was more complicated than I'd expected when I first buried those harmless color bombs in my backyard. The phone rang one final time as I drove away from Willowbrook Heights, an attorney calling about a similar case in another state. My hand hovered over the device as I faced the ultimate choice: answer and risk becoming a serial crusader against HOA corruption, or let injustice continue because victory had changed me into someone I wasn't sure I recognized. Sometimes the person you become while fighting monsters is scarier than the monsters themselves. The color powder was washable, but some transformations last forever.